Today's presentation is Beyond Automobiles, a conversation on environmental justice and transportation. And the Beyond Automobiles part is, what's the future hold? As we know, automobiles are great for mobility, but there's a lot of negative externalities with automobiles like pollution and cost. And damage to our roads and streets. And environmental justice is how do automobiles impact, and specifically the built environment, impact folks in neighborhoods where we're just all driving to get through from one area to the other. And we're going to talk about some specific examples of the type of changes that have happened in this area. So looking back to 1964, the Civil Rights Act, which will be 60 years old here in this coming July. We're going to look at Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And Title VI says, simple justice requires that public funds to which all taxpayers of all races, colors, and national origins contribute not be spent in any fashion which encourages, entrenches, subsidizes, or results in racial, color, or national origin discrimination. So if you think back to that time, people of color, blacks, brown people, were discriminated against, segregated in transportation, in restaurants, on airplanes, buses, and all of the facilities that kind of connect all of those together. In 2021, President Biden directed the entire federal government, including the US EPA, to prioritize protecting and investing in overburdened and underserved communities across America. And there's a long quote that goes with it, but we'll get right into it. So, urban renewal, right? We've all heard that term. What happened in 1950, Cincinnati's West End neighborhood right across the river from us here. 95% of the population of this neighborhood, which was tens of thousands of people, had many churches, many schools, had Crosley Field, were basically forcibly moved out of this neighborhood. And you can see in 2021, we have the interstate going through it. The city renamed it Queensgate, created these mega super blocks, and tried to sell off the land to light industrial and warehousing, which was never a success. And there are still people that live in this neighborhood today, but mostly it's just a sea of concrete and asphalt. Not really a pleasant place to be, but at one time it was a thriving, very significant neighborhood for this region. Also, right across the river, the Licking River in Newport, the West Side neighborhood more recently has been decimated and torn down. So in the late 1990s, these articles are from that period. Over 200 families their homes were destroyed and they were forced to move out. And as part of this project, Kentucky 9, also AA highway, right, coming down north, was brought in to the roundabout and then continued on to the Taylor-Southgate Bridge, to the other roundabout over by the Newport on the Levee. And now KYTC wants to widen this corridor, the 4th Street Bridge corridor, as it's coming through into and connecting to Route 9. 4th Street and 5th Street make up Kentucky 8. And so what is this going to do? It's going to bring more emissions to the neighborhood. The federal government recognizes what they call induced demand. Basically, if you build something for people, they'll use it, right? And if you build good things for people, people will use that good thing. If you build things that maybe have these negative externalities, then people will use them. And people that are by and large using them are not impacted by these negative externalities. And what are those? Auto emissions are one. And we're not making progress in this region on reducing our auto emissions. Emissions in buildings has come way down, but road transportation has not gone down. You can see here the two main contributors to carbon emissions in the Cincinnati region are the Miami power plant, which you can see from the airport when you take off, right over by Indiana, and our road transportation network. And road transportation network's 32%, and for years and years it's been at that elevated number and it's not been going down. So the folks that remain in the West Side neighborhood and of course the Licking Riverside neighborhood, which we're right on the border of, will get more auto emissions. They'll also get more storm water runoff because of more impervious area. KYTC is going to tear down trees to build these extra lanes. And also sound pollution, right? Right now, semis are banned in this corridor. And pretty soon, once this bridge is open, the new bridge is built and opened back up, semis are going to be coming through here. And while they're not saying it, the speculation is that while the Brent Spence corridor is under construction, this is going to be a major bypass, east-west bypass to get people across Covington into Newport and then up onto 71, like the Taylor-Southgate Bridge. So we talked about these impacted populations. The West Side neighborhood in Newport, the West End in Cincinnati, and some of the other neighborhoods also in Cincinnati as well that were impacted. If the federal government's saying these things are bad, what is the federal government doing about it? Well, there's a provision to alert the federal government. Basically, it's to write them a letter and say, we have concerns about this. And our foundation, along with about 20 other nonprofits, faith-based groups, Trinity Church signed this letter as well, wrote a letter to the Federal Highway Administration outlining the concerns on the Brent Spence Bridge highway expansion. And if you've been paying attention to this, for 20 years they've said we need to replace the bridge, and people are afraid the bridge is going to fall down. But what they're now saying is this is going to be a highway widening project, and we're going to widen 6.5 miles of freeway. And we're going to take it from 42 feet right now to 142 feet. So we're going to triple the size of it coming across the river. And Covington's going to feel these impacts as well. So Covington and the West End were both part of this letter. Although the city of Covington did not sign on, we had one commissioner that signed on in Covington. And the Federal Highway Administration has a Title VI office. So there's about a half dozen people that work in this office in Washington, D.C. We had a conference call with them, talked about the project here, talked about the concerns, talked about the neighborhoods, and they reviewed the data and they said, we think you guys have a legitimate complaint here, and so we're going to open up an investigation. So this is a civil rights violation, potential violation, and they're going to investigate it. They're a very small office. They only have half dozen people or so that work there, so they said it's probably going to be a couple years. What can they do? Typically, it's a settlement. So in this case, we talked to the environmental lawyer out of Milwaukee that we've been working with. His name's Dennis Krasinski. He said the largest settlement that he's seen is $15 million. It's not going to go a long way, but it's a start, and that money would be spent in the neighborhoods. The Title VI office would not, most likely not stop the project from happening, although they can say help make the project better, make it less worse.
Are you advocating stopping the project? It sounds like you're saying that we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. So it's $3.8 billion. And what we're advocating for is to expand transit, not highways. So let's spend that money here. The bridge is not falling down. If they want to replace the bridge, fine. Put light rail on the bridge.
Have you driven across that thing daily?
I live 500 meters from it. So yeah, we'll get to all this in the Q&A. The Kentucky 8 Licking River Bridge project, we're also working with the neighborhoods in this project. We've had over 900 people that have signed on to a petition that's saying that they don't want this bridge to be expanded via the number of lanes. They want expanded sidewalks, expanded bike lanes. They want a streetcar on the bridge. And fine, let's go ahead and build the bridge, but let's make it a right size and not expand it so that there is more automobile traffic coming through here. And KYTC is determined not to listen to the neighborhoods, not to listen to what people want, but to just go with a plan that's about 20 years old and just widen it. Ironically, they're planning to reduce the number of lanes on 4th Street to 2 lanes. But they want to add an extra lane onto the bridge. So the people in Newport especially, I think, and people in the historic Licking Riverside neighborhood are not happy about this. They see it as inducing more traffic going to the east, and they don't want that, they don't want additional traffic. So this letter is in draft form. This would be going to U.S. Department of Transportation, Secretary Pete. So these are, I think theoretical things and things that, it's like we're talking about neighborhoods advocating for themselves and writing letters. But what are some of the things that can be done and are being done to help these communities out? And this is a project in College Hill that we're reconnecting the community. The community has a high number of automobile crashes, injuries, and deaths that have occurred on North Bend Road and Hamilton Avenue. These roads were made for people in the suburbs to get from downtown as quickly as they can out. And what's happened is the people that live, there are houses that line these roads, and a school, a church, a library, businesses. They're all faced with dealing with all these negative externalities. And people in the neighborhood have been killed on these roads. And there has been way too many people speeding, and speed's kind of like the #1 predictor of that. So this was a safety project that added a 2-way protected bike lane and added protected parking. Reduce the number of drive lanes from 4 to 2. And the results are dramatic. It's a little hard to see on this graph. But on one side of North Bend, there were about 20% of the drivers were going 40 miles an hour and over, and that was reduced to about 5%. And on the other side, it was much worse. About 40% were going above 40 miles an hour, and that was reduced to about 7%. Now, here's a quote from someone that lives in the neighborhood. This was actually during construction, and she said, "I've already seen such a difference in traffic speeds and general behavior. People are slower for the most part in the sections where improvements have been made and are actually stopping for pedestrians at crosswalks. And we did a check on the number of crashes, injuries, and serious injuries that have occurred in about 45 days that it's been up. Crashes went down 17%, and injuries went down 100%. And this is looking back at the preceding 45 days. So I think that's like 7 injuries, and we had 1 serious injury, and that went down to 0. So serious injury is basically like you're a quadriplegic when you walk out, you've lost an organ, maybe you die later on, your life is like completely changed. A lot of the people that have serious injuries end up dying, and they're not actually classified as traffic deaths because they only look at like 30 days. So if you make it past that, then you died of some other cause. And that's just in 45 days. I mean, this road has had thousands of injuries over the years on it. So it's really bad. And the neighbors basically got together and said, we've got to do something about this. And so that happened there. The Girl Scout Bridge, which is 11th Street Bridge, was the old shortway bridge. KYTC tore that down and built a much wider, faster bridge. They only put in a 4-foot 10-inch sidewalk that has like no barrier. And a beloved member of the community was killed a year ago on this bridge. And so KYTC has agreed to reduce the number of lanes on this bridge, taking it from 4 to 3, and repurposing one of the lanes as a 2-way protected bike lane with a concrete barrier. They've agreed to it, but it hasn't happened yet. We've actually been working on the design phase, and they keep throwing more of like obstacles at it. So I think they're just trying to drive the price up so that eventually we go away. But we're still working at it. And also out of that, Covington and Newport both adopted a resolution supporting the creation of a bike plan, which would be a safety plan for people biking, and it would assist people walking to and make it safer for them as well. And that's in progress and is supposed to be finished by the end of this year. And the kind of on a national level, America Walks, which is a nonprofit, and it's run by the executive directors out of Seattle. He was the former Seattle mayor, Mike McGinnis. I think he was mayor in like the early 10s, and did a lot of good work in Seattle. They have a working group, a program called Freeway Fighters, and basically these are groups across the United States that are either working to stop freeway expansion, tear down freeways that are harming communities, or cover freeways, so cap them, and kind of like what they want to do over at Fort Washington Way, where they want to cap that and reclaim that space. And so they're going to have their first summit. They're coming to Cincinnati in 2 weeks. We're actually going to have the first session here at Trinity, and then there'll be a session over in Cincinnati, and this is 43 grassroots advocates from around the whole country. So a lot of folks in Texas are coming. There's people from Boston, from Seattle, from Portland, Florida, California, Milwaukee, will all be here. So what can all of us do as citizens? Take action, right? And the first thing would be sign a petition or a letter. Open your eyes to different transit, walk, or bike. Try that one day a week. And I bought an e-bike, and I thought I want to experience this for myself, right? I just don't want to tell people the way that they should do things or the way I think that they should do things, but I want to experience that for myself, right? Take the bus. and you'll find out the bus doesn't come very often. It's very slow. The routes are roundabout, and in a lot of places it doesn't even go, especially here in Northern Kentucky. Talk to your elected officials. Tell them that this is what you want. Tell them that you think this is going to be good for you and for your neighbors, and that's really important. Elected officials, they rarely hear from their constituents, and when they have like several constituents saying the same thing to them, some of them really take notice. And so, keep those conversations going. And lastly, donate. So we'll switch to the Q&A part of this. Jody will bring around the microphone, and I'll do my best to answer questions. Can you click the bottom of it? I don't think it's on. Just tap it lightly. It's a light tap. Try talking now, Steve.
Is it working?
That's
Okay.
working. Yes, you got it.
All right,
Thank you.
First, with the emissions from transportation, do we know how much of that is, what percentage of that is through transportation versus local transportation? Does the data
the emissions,
separate that?
The emissions?
Yeah.
I do not know how much is through traffic versus how much is local.
It'd be an interesting number, but so that
Yeah.
answers that first one. We don't know.
Yeah, there's this data is gathered from, I'm trying to think of the name of the company. They look at like overall emissions, but there's another company that looks at transportation movement, and we've looked at their data before, and they basically track, like, they take the data from like your phone, because when you're in your car with your phone, that data is collected and then sold. And then trucking companies have data that they use. They have like their own, the truckers have their own like GPS systems, and that data is collected and sold, and then you can use that data to say, here's how many trucks or cars originated outside of the Cincinnati area,
Right.
and how many didn't stop. Unfortunately, that data is really expensive, and from what we've seen, it's not super accurate.
Right.
But definitely, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
It'd be nice to know.
There are a lot of trucks that go through here and don't stop, but yeah.
Right. The second question has to do with North College Hill or
College Hill, yeah.
College Hill. So the improvements there, is that due to less traffic or the behavior of is the traffic level still the same, but people are driving differently?
Yeah, the traffic level is about the same. The number one predictor of driver speed is the width of the roadway.
Okay.
So by reducing the width of the roadway, you naturally reduce the speed. There's also traffic signals up there, so that also slows people down as well.
I just thought maybe the fast drivers went somewhere else and were causing problems.
Yeah,
over there.
well, we are looking at that, right? There's a couple roads that are bypass roads, Belmont, and I can't remember the other one, but we are looking at those roads as well. We took radar data beforehand and traffic counts beforehand. But yeah, we have a saying like in our work that everyone else's automobile is the problem, right? And so the people that live on those streets, a lot of them have driveways, they drive. Everybody else's car that's driving through is the problem, right?
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah, good
Thank
questions.
you.
Anyone else?
So there are a number of communities where a walkable way of life just isn't feasible. There's not convenience stores and food marts and jobs that close that they have to travel. Where do we make room for electric vehicles, on the roadways if we're not expanding the roadways
Yeah.
to accommodate?
Good question. So I think some data first, 20% of the households in the Cincinnati area don't have access to an automobile. And the cost of owning an automobile, as you guys know, has gone way up. AAA is now saying it's $12,000 a year on average for an automobile. Sounds like you got a little feedback.
I'll turn it back on afterwards.
Okay, thanks, Mitch. In the west side neighborhood of Newport, 40% of the households don't have access to an automobile. Actually, we own a Tesla, an electric vehicle, and so you would think, hey, electric vehicles would be like the way of the future, we're not having this pollution, at least not in our neighborhoods, right? And it turns out that 50% of the automobile pollution is actually through tire and brake wear. So driving an electric vehicle, turns out, isn't actually the solution, and these vehicles are actually heavier. On our Model X, we only get about 12,000 miles on a set of tires because they wear out so quickly, since it's such a heavy automobile.
It's not my driving.
I think also the capacity of a lane is extremely high. I think theoretically it's like, thousands and thousands of vehicles per hour for one lane. It's the traffic controls on the other ends. So in a Newport side, it's a roundabout, and on the Covington side, it's the light, the signal light at 4th and Garrett. So there are ways that KYTC could get more throughput without adding more lanes. What we found is that 84% of the drivers on one lane right now speed going into Newport. So we have to ask, come up with some other solutions that are out there, come up with some other choices rather than just more lanes. And traffic counts are going down too. People are not driving as much. And I think that, we're advocating for, let's spend this money on, a really robust transit system, buses, light rail. Maybe light rail is kind of like, the ultimate, and maybe we can't reach that in our lifetimes, but buses are pretty straightforward, and so, let's do that. Let's expand buses, and let's make room for more people and get more shops in the neighborhood so you can walk to those neighborhoods.
That's actually a good segue to the question I was going to ask, what is related to if we're making it sort of more difficult to drive, I guess you could say, there needs to then be an alternative in terms of the transportation that's provided. So I'm wondering, with the discussion about either of the bridges, how involved is Tank in that? Because I'm assuming Tank would be the service provider to take that additional demand. Is there a plan for funding getting pushed to Tank instead? Has that been talked about?
Quite frankly, Tank is run by people that hate transit. So, not the people that do the work. Yeah. We're trying to include them in the conversations, and they don't have any interest in it. Tank is cut service, and so I think that there needs to be some big changes there before Tank can be part of those conversations. Metro, on the other hand, Hamilton County did pass a tax levy, which some of that goes to expanding Metro service, and some of it goes to, unfortunately, road widening. Some of it's like fixing roads too. And they're planning bus rapid transit up Hamilton Avenue and Reading. And some of these traffic calming features can be part of that. In the bike lane that we built on North Bend, we actually built a ramp that people getting on the bus will walk out onto the ramp, and then people riding bikes can ride over top of the ramp. And so it makes the bus stop a lot quicker. It's also level boarding. So if you're in a wheelchair, using a rollator, you're basically like stepping onto the bus. And this is like kind of like best practice in like communities is if you've ever ridden the streetcar, there's not a step into the streetcar. You just walk straight on or roll straight on. And BRT would be the same type of setup where it's like level boarding right onto it, no steps.
Clear, cool, thanks.
Is this on? It's on. Hello.
Hi there.
I first want to make a comment about what you were saying in terms of how about communities that may not necessarily be suitable to further like improvements in walkability because they might not have commercial amenities close by to walk to. I think something important to say is that we can improve walkability and bikeability in transit, and that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to do that. We are just giving people more options. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask about the Clifton Avenue bike lane. I believe you all worked on that.
Yeah.
I actually ride that every day, and I'm very grateful for its presence. It's made life safer and easier. Are there plans to bring those bus stop pads over to Clifton, or to look at, because that's like my biggest issue with that.
Yeah, the big gaps, for
Right,
sure. Yeah,
right.
I've ridden it and buses will pull in and you're heading towards the bus. It's a little disconcerting.
Right.
I know the city's working on a permanent plan for that. UC has been advocating against making it permanent, although since this freshman student, the two freshmen that were struck and one of them killed
Right,
over on
right.
Jefferson, and then the staff member that was killed on MLK this
Yeah.
year, they've now since kind of changed their messaging, and also thanks to the community for coming out and advocating and talking to them. So I know the city's working on it. The city's like just way understaffed right now.
Okay.
So I don't have a timeline or a date, but yeah, whenever they have some preliminary designs, I'd be happy to share those out.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm back to my original question.
Yes.
What were you saying about the bridge? Are you advocating not doing the bridge, or not doing a new bridge? Or the bridge we have now is 4 lanes, and that was designed with 3 lanes, so everybody's crowded.
Yeah.
And I seem to get the feeling that you were not in favor of the brand-new bridge coming across. Can you elaborate on that to something that'll give me some comfort? Because population is growing, the number of vehicles in the United States is growing, northbound and southbound 75 is a major, major artery. What is your alternative?
Yeah. So, yeah, I can elucidate on that. I'm not sure if it'll give you comfort. But you're right. The bridge was originally designed with 3 lanes northbound and 3 lanes southbound. KYTC in, I think it was the 1980s, decided that their priority was driver throughput and not safety. And so they restriped it to have 4 lanes. They removed the shoulders, the breakdown lanes, and added 4 lanes. And you're right, it's a tight bridge. Interestingly, the bridge is actually fairly safe, in comparison to the interstate because drivers go slower on it because it does feel more crowded. Interestingly, the data shows that the number of vehicles on the bridge peaked in, I think about 10 years ago, and has dropped since then in 2014. Why did it peak? Well, if you've been on the Cincinnati side and you've gone north on 75, like ODOT's been working on that for 10 years, right? And they just keep widening and making it bigger, and there's delays that way, and there's delays going up the hill, right, when you go southbound. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve, right, here? I think that's what we have to ask. And if it's safety, let's take it back to 3 lanes.
So you're saying do not build the bridge?
What I'm saying is that this was sold to us as a bridge replacement. And what they're now going to do is they're going to widen the road all the way from the I-275 split in Erlanger all the way to the Western Hills Viaduct.
Sir, my understanding was never a replacement, but as another alternative, that is keep both bridges open, not a replacement.
Well, if you go back and look at the newspaper articles from 25 years ago, it was always, we're going to either replace the bridge or add another bridge. But right now, it's this major road widening. The bridge is only a very small part of it. It's $3.8 billion. The bridge is probably like $500 million. So if you want a new bridge, if you want to widen the bridge, fine, put light rail on it. But we don't need all the extra lanes in Covington out to Erlanger. It's unnecessary. The backups are caused by trucks taking 3 lanes coming up the hill. And put some enforcement out there and move the trucks over, put in a dedicated lane for trucks. $3.8 billion is a lot of money. We could do a lot of things with that money in this area. We could build 100 miles of light rail with it. Yeah, we think there's alternatives. We think that they should at least explore it. It's in OKI's plan. It's called the North-South Transportation Plan. You can look it up. It's on OKI's website. They have a commuter rail component. What John Brzezina, who's the director of transportation for Cincinnati, told me is that no one's ever asked them for rail. So they just build more roads. This is what they're used to building. So unless people start asking for things different, or at least let's have the conversation about it, right? Let's talk about what other possibilities are there. Cincinnati had 3 different votes on the streetcar, 3-mile line. And that was like, I think $150 million. This is $3.8 billion. How many of you have voted for that, right? We never had a vote on it.
It has managed to get to 3.8 by pushing it down the road. When I originally looked at the original plans, it was less than 3. That was not that many years ago, and now it's been pushed to 3.8. If we push it down further, it's just going to go up more.
Well, that's potentially true, but why didn't a few years ago we look at several different alternatives?
As someone who lives in a walkable neighborhood, we take advantage of that often. What we don't do enough is we don't take advantage of transit because we don't have to, I guess is basically the reason why. And recently, right, and I've just now started really looking, I mean, when we travel, I always look at the bus schedules. We always take public transportation. Having recently tried to be able to help the refugee family that we're sponsoring that is on the west side of Newport to be able to get to the Kentucky Refugee Ministry's office over here on Russell is going to take them nearly 40 minutes because they have to go downtown. There is no way to get between Newport and Covington. And I thought, surely I'm not looking at this correctly. I keep going back to the bus schedules. I'm like, they could walk the 1.5 miles over here quicker than they can take the public transit. And I know you said the tank has not been really responsive as far as transit and all of that, and I know they've cut routes and all. What's the best way of going about of advocating for additional routes, more accessible routes to those neighborhoods that are cut off and need to get to Kroger and to the, the library and other places?
Yeah, I think it's, and maybe there's somebody, Jody, I don't know if you have an answer to this.
I'd be happy to answer that question. One of the most important things is just to communicate with Tank. They are led by a board of directors. I formerly was on that board as the only person that used Tank. So you have suburban, essentially it's rich white men and women, white. So it is a challenge. Currently, Tank can't take the 4th Street Bridge, which is part of the disadvantage. And then they bring in consultants that look, and there is an equity component because they do get federal funds that has to be evaluated. But the public does not communicate until Tank changes something. They don't advocate like you're speaking of. So I'd highly recommend reaching out to Tank and sending letters directly to them. Welcome.
I wondered if a lot of the reasons for having communities cut off within Newport and Covington has been, over the past few years, there's been a really big push for Tank to get people further out towards the airport, into all of those warehouses and other places for residents of these two communities in particular to get to work. Has that impacted adversely the transportation between Newport and Covington?
I don't believe that's a factor at all. A lot of those additional routes going out to the warehouses are paid for by those companies. They actually run extra Tank buses, which has also increased service for other users. We've never been good, same with the South Bank shuttle. You're going to do that horseshoe. I use it frequently and just enjoy the ride to get to Covington. So, great question though. Anyone else?
This light rail concept is totally new to me, and I can't visualize very clearly how it would be used, and who's the population that benefits from that. Because when I think of the bridge and traffic, I think of trucks and cars and trying to get through the city as much as any place in the city. So how does the light rail function? Who benefits from that?
Sure. Well, I think anyone can use it. The streetcar has shown that there are over 100,000 people are using that, and we actually have a survey going on that right now. And people are using it for entertainment. They're using it to get to their jobs. They're using it to go to the doctor, get groceries, go to the pharmacy. Light rail would be more of a longer distance connection, but still regional. So if you think, say, like Blue Ash to the airport would probably be like the max for light rail, maybe Mason. And it would definitely have like a component. Say if you're coming from Blue Ash, you'd have like an easy connection in downtown Cincinnati, downtown Covington. If you're coming from, say, out by NKU, and have a connection into downtown Newport, across the 4th Street Bridge, and then there'd be, the transit centers where people could connect with buses and light rail as well. So it's a possibility to reuse like our transit center here in Covington, and you could have a light rail line that goes out to the airport. And then you could also connect buses off of that as well. There's a ton of jobs right past the airport, right? But there's not a lot of people that can afford to live there. So there's this big disconnect between where people live and where the jobs are, right? And we're not going to have like 1 million square foot warehouses in the future in Covington, right? not going to happen. So how do we get those people to the jobs from where they live in a safe, efficient manner? And so, I would encourage you to travel. Portland, Oregon would be a great place to try out light rail. They have an extensive system that is fairly modern. Austin, which is a little bit larger than Cincinnati, not by a whole lot, maybe about the same size as Portland. They have, I think, 3 light rail lines, and they're adding many more right now. But the combination of the rail and the bus and bike as well, where a lot of times you can just roll your bike onto the rail, it really enables people to get around.
Can I add to that? I think the comment on induced demand earlier is super important there too. I live in Over the Rhine, and I'll tell you that if there was more reliable transportation to get to downtown Covington, I would go to Riverside Korean a lot more. So, I mean, I think that a lot of that would just keep building up, especially when you're connecting suburbs and neighborhoods that are further out. So, yeah.
I have 2 comments. The first is in regards to the bridge versus highway expansion. I think there are many, many of us that would say, sure, go ahead, build a new bridge, but we don't need 6 miles of more highways. And, that's 2 completely separate issues. And, and if you're going to build the bridge, maybe we're not ready for light rail, but prep it. It's insane that we would be building these projects to last 100 years. And maybe we're not ready for light rail here for 50 years, but we're not going to get it at all if we don't prep the bridges, and that just means the underlying structure. The second point that I would like to make is that, not to keep dissing on Tank, but you may not know this, that you cannot take a bus direct to the airport from Covington. You have to go to Cincinnati, or you have to transfer twice. So you have to take 3 separate buses through northern Kentucky to get there. So when you think about all the jobs that are out by the airport, or we talk about all of this, I don't think they're meeting that quota, when it comes to getting people from the urban core out to all the warehouses and industry in Boone County. I mean, that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, you have to go to Cincinnati to get a Tank bus to go to the airport. Yes.
I wanted to follow up on that too. How do we combat this overwhelming mindset that we are all here for the benefit of the damned automobile? That we need more and more lanes, we need to spew more and more blacktop. What are the points of concern? How long is stuff backed up? If we could support public transit, there would be fewer people sitting in those backups. What about the people that live right next to these bridges? I live right next to the 4th Street Bridge between Covington and Newport. No data whatsoever support any need for another lane. 0, 0, 0 data. But the Transportation Cabinet is demanding it anyway. Why? And how do we get people to stop? Our population isn't booming. We only grew 0.4% in 2022. We're declining, It's certainly not booming, and even if it were, is spewing more blacktop the solution? Is that sustainable? How many more lanes? Enough lanes to eliminate the Licking Riverside neighborhood, the oldest neighborhood in Covington? For what? So that jack wagons can get from one suburb to another faster? What about all the people on foot? What about the people that live there who want walkability? The current traffic configuration supports all of the needs, including into the future. So I want to know how we can combat that sadly errant, disastrous mindset that's going to bury us all in blacktop for the benefit of the automobile.
Yeah, I think that, There's a lot of layers to that, and it's taken us 100 years to get to this point. But I think that, I think you guys are all evidence, and the 20 people watching online as well, that, and they've got a ton of questions too, is that, maybe things aren't right here. And, we've been doing this for 100 years in this country. And if you look at some of the other countries, it doesn't have to be like this. And, we have one of the highest death rates in the world because of the automobile. The number of people, 42,000 people killed last year by drivers, a staggering number. And it's actually gotten safer inside of automobiles with all the technology, airbags and seatbelt campaigns and traction control. But to be outside of an automobile, the numbers are going way up. And we've actually regressed back to the 1980s. And it doesn't seem to be abating. Drivers have gotten more aggressive since the pandemic. There's less drivers on the road, so that means that they can go faster. And speed's the number one predictor of injury and death. So I think it's, like all of you, like, let's talking about this, and let's raise awareness that, there's other ways this money can be spent on other things. And this is our tax money, right? And this tax money is available from the federal government, and other communities are applying for it, and they're getting it. So your federal taxes are going to Austin to build their light rail system. Your federal taxes are going to Seattle to build their wonderful BRT bus system. Seattle has seen the number of people in cars drop by 10% over the last 10 years because they've built an awesome bus system. You can go there and it's like a 3-minute wait for a bus. And that bus will take you within like a 3-minute walk of wherever you want to go. And you don't have to like transfer 3 times to get to the airport. They built the light rail system to get to the airport. And they did it because things got so bad. So many people moved there to work for Microsoft and Amazon that it was, Microsoft and Amazon are like, we have to have our own buses now because it's just ridiculous. Traffic's gotten so bad. I think Cincinnati's not to that point, right? Our traffic by and large is not really bad as far as like, backups go compared to other cities. But what is bad is the number of people that are dying on our roads, the number of people being seriously injured, and the pollution, right? I mean, the pollution this summer with the wildfire smoke, it's just like exacerbated all of the pollution from automobiles that we all deal with that kind of hangs around in the basin here. I think, our foundation has gone all in on this, and we're trying to come up with ways, creative ways to like get people to pay attention and have these conversations. And I think, like you being a part of that is a big part of it. And talking to politicians and just getting your neighbors to talk to them and saying, we want different things. So the freeway fighters, right, they're coming, and it's grassroots. It's people that are from around the country that aren't well funded. There are no foundations that fund this kind of stuff. But there's going to be two national foundations that are going to be here that are keeping an eye on this. And I think that the Trinity community here should be like, really proud of like this being the place where maybe the seed was planted, and Covington and Cincinnati, that they're hoping to bring more exposure and more money to this, right? I mean, there's a ton of money in the automobile lobby that they're lobbying for more roads, right? Because more roads means people want to drive and they can sell more cars. And so that's going to be important, but they're also working on a manifesto. And some of these people that are going to be here are connected, like the former mayor of Seattle, and there's other people that run some nonprofits that are connected. And this manifesto is basically going to say to the federal government, we should have a 5-year or some type of moratorium on this wholesale highway expansion plan that you've put together. And they're still working that out. The last conversation was maybe instead of 5 years or 10 years, it would be until we start meeting our climate goals, right? And I think this is just it. It's like people go, the federal government said we should stimulate the economy during COVID, so we have billions of dollars we're going to spend. So the lobbyists go and they all say, well, you should spend it on this. And unfortunately, the bike lobby and the rail lobby really don't exist. But the automobile lobby was certainly there saying to the politicians in Washington, spend it here. And they're like, sure, why wouldn't we? Everybody just goes along with it. We've all gone along with this. And this is not unique to Cincinnati. It's not unique to Newport and Covington. This is happening nationwide. That you should see Austin. Austin has I think it's 18 lanes going through the heart of Austin. They want to add more lanes to this. All the while, the voters of Austin are saying, no, we want light rail. We're going to fund light rail ourselves in conjunction with the federal government. So, stay active, keep talking about it, talk to your neighbors.
Yeah, well, you kind of hit on what I was going to mention too, was the whole car lobby. I mean, if you look at history, pretty much all the Midwestern cities back in the day before the car had some kind of transportation system that was really effective, and even an between cities trolley system that was pretty effective. And the car companies came along and actually squashed all that so they could sell more cars. But you're also going to be looking at, I wonder how much of it is a mindset of people and how much is really a lot of lobbying and other things going on with the automobile manufacturers, and really Lyft and Uber. If you sell less cars, have good mass transit, their bottom line goes down. So there's a lot for them to lose. A lot of things in America run that way, unfortunately, is that somebody's making a lot of money off of it, and if you want to change it, they're going to lose a big piece of their pie.
Yeah, I think that for sure, right? There's a lot of money to be made in the automobile industry. And the one thing I think that all of us need to keep in mind is most of the money that you spend on your car does not stay here. So when you go and you put fuel in your car, right, we all know gas stations make their money on chips and soda. That money goes elsewhere, it doesn't stay here. When you buy your car, that money by and large goes elsewhere, right? A little bit of profit to the dealer, but we all know that dealers make very little profit. They're making it on the repairs. So that money's leaving this area. If you had an extra $10,000 or $12,000 in your pocket every year, what could you spend that money on, right? Probably you'd upgrade your housing, right? We're in a housing crisis right now. And so that would go a long way for people. So there's a lot of data out there that shows that people that take transit, that bike, spend more money than drivers do in the local economy. But for sure, I mean, even if you didn't, I think that just having that extra money would be beneficial. I think maybe we'll take one question online and then wrap it up. Thank you guys for coming. I don't know if there's really so many questions here, or if it's just like an ongoing dialogue they're having amongst themselves. There's one question about, is the Freeway Fighters meeting open to the public? It is not a public meeting. We had limited space, and they wanted to make sure they got everybody from around the country space here. There is an evening dinner the night it's here, right, which is the Friday night, that's open to the public. If you're interested in coming and I think we're going to have tacos. Just let us know. There's a sign-up sheet out there. Just sign your name and email. Just to let us know you were here, and if you're interested in the Freeway Fighters, coming to that, just put like FF behind your email, and we'll send you an invite to that. Thank you all for coming and the good questions, and Look forward to dialoguing with all of you in the future.